Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little Slaw YouTube channel. So today in this video, we are going to see the requirement collection document part 2. So previously in our video, we discussed about the part 1 with 15 questions, and in this video, we are going to see some more questions, which again may be important for your particular type of project. So please do watch the entire video. Just make note of the questions and the explanations which I'm giving so that you can address them to the stakeholders while we are discussing it. So, the first question in part 2 is the testing tools and techniques. So, you can ask the project or the stakeholders that do the project or the team has any specific preferred or mandatory performance testing tools or technologies that has to be followed. So, you can check with them and make note of those tools that has to be part of the tool testing. And also you can check whether is there any compatibility existing frameworks that has to be included as part of the testing, so you can understand or have a note of these. So just make sure that these part, the testing tools, the technologies, and the framework part has to be noted down as part of your requirement document, and that's the very first question in your part 2. So now we will move on to the second question in your part 2, which is testing schedule. So this is a very critical part again, because you will have to get the schedule, because there will be like multiple teams that are part of your testing, a part of the development and testing, and also their team will have a particular day to sign off, and they will have to send the application to production. So you'll have to get the testing schedule, and you have to plan accordingly. So please check with the stakeholders and the team and make sure you have all the dates ready, like for any number of tests that they're going to plan. So you'll have to have your testing schedules that are to be ready with you for your testing based on the number of tests, number of load tests or stress tests or scalability tests or whatever. And in fact, that includes your scripting as well. So starting from scripting to your end result that you're going to share, everything has to be scheduled, and you have to give the number of dates. Like for example, like it will take 1 day for load test, and reporting it can be like half day. So based on that, you can plan your schedule. And then the third question is the reporting and analysis requirements. So when it comes to reporting and analysis requirements, you should understand like in what format do you really need to document. So some of them might need to be in an email, and some might want it to be in a Word document, or some might need to be that in the Confluence. So there are like different ways or different modes of communicating the test results. So just understand like in what mode or in what way do they need to get communicated, and also you can understand like who are all the person, who are the people that has to be kept in the email as CC, and who are all the people that has to be given access to view the results. So you have to understand, and you have just make sure like who are all the people who are to be in the to and in CC, and just understand like in what format and in what are the specific analysis that you have to follow. In case if the team has any specific template to follow, just make sure you get that and then follow the same template for your reporting. And then when it comes to the budget and resource constraints, so this is another critical part, because sometimes, or like most of the times, the performance testing will have a very limited budget. So you have to accordingly staff your resources. For example, you might need more resources when you're doing your scripting, but for execution, you might have just one resource, and that's more than enough. So you have to plan your budget and resourcing, so you can raise this question like how many resources can be allocated for this. And this part cannot be asked in every project, but it depends on what kind of project you need, and if it really needs to be asked, please go for that. Just make sure you get your allocated budget and the staff, so that you can complete the testing on time every time. So again, I would say for scripting we might need more resources, but for execution and for reporting you can have a very less number of resources. And when it comes to the feedback and iteration process, just check with the team like how will the feedback from the performance testing team goes to the development team, or what kind of feedback or the recommendations that they need, whether they do need a detailed analysis results, or like in terms of the performance tuning. And also based on the feedback, you'll have to address them. And then there is another part which is followed by this feedback and iteration, which is once you give them the feedback, the developer will have to work, and then you'll have to again do a reiteration or regression testing to make sure that whether the changes have made any changes, any impact or improvement to the application. So just understand whether or how does this feedback works. And then when it comes to the risk management, you'll have to understand what is the risk, or what are the main risks that are associated with the performance testing, for example performance issues in the application. For example, if you were not able to tune the application, and if it is released in the production, whether that's a major risk, or is there any major reasons for you to stop the application from going into production. So you'll have to understand, because once you understand the risk management, or the once you assess the risk, you can decide on your go or no go of the application to the production environment. Because if the application goes to the production with any performance issues, then the goodwill will go down. So it all depends on the performance tester's hand. So you'll have to have control over the risk management. And then when it comes to the integration points and APIs, like the previous video we discussed about the third party and the any other protocol. So similarly, here we have to understand whether is there are any other external systems or the APIs that are associated or that are interacting with the application. Again, this is very critical to understand, because if there are any APIs and external systems are being tested, so we have to understand whether they are part of the scope or whether they're outside the scope. So this has to be again identified and also has to be documented, and also you have to make sure whether it's inside the scope and if it is outside the scope, and also you'll have to address them that as part of your test plan and your test strategy document if they are inside your scope. And then the most critical part, which is the caching and data management. So most of the applications might take a lot of response times during during the user when he's accessing for the first time because of the cache. So you'll have to check with the stakeholders or the business or the developers that whether you'll have to handle the cache. For example, like when you're doing your testing, you should make some changes to the settings that it will impact whether you are going to clear the cache when you're running the test every time, or you're going to keep the cache without clearing it, so that there won't be a much change in the response time. So you'll have to check that, and this question has to go not to the business but to the development team, so that you can understand whether or how to handle this cache part. And just make sure, if it is not, or if you're not going to worry about that, then just leave it. But if there is something, then you'll have to get it documented. And then the another critical part is the load balancing. So you'll have to understand whether the application is load balanced and what kind of algorithms is used for load balancing, and whether they are properly load balanced, and how does or what in under what criteria does that goes, like whether it's the algorithm that's been set up or the configuration that's been set up is working fine. So you have to understand all those part. And then how does the failover mechanism works, whether the application goes down, and how does the failover works, whether the application comes back at the proper time. So all these load balancing and failover mechanisms has to be noted down before you move on to your scripting or your test execution, because this load balancing part again plays a major role in the response times, whether because if you do not properly load balance, then there are chances where the response times will go high. And moving on to the next part, which is the performance baseline and historical data. So this is another question that you can raise it with the business analyst or to the development team, that you have any historical response times for the application, so that you can have that as your benchmark rather than you again try working on your benchmark. So you can use this for your comparison. You can use this as a baseline for your performance testing results. So just check with the team whether you have any historical performance data, and if you have it handy, then it's very useful, because this is uh, a rare chance, because for the new applications you might not have, but for most of the other applications, if you are making any config changes or any new updates to the existing application, you will have a set of performance baseline data for your application, so you can make use of it. And the next part is the mobile and device considerations, because nowadays we all know that the applications that we test, or that the applications that we use, are mostly into the web and in the mobile format. So you'll have to understand that whether you're going to do it in the only in the web module, or also you're going to test it in the mobile devices like the mobile phones or the tablets. And in case if it's mobile phones, are going to distribute the mobile into Android and the iPhone and into different any other different operating systems. So you'll have to understand all these aspects, because this will help you to work on your scripting, and this will also help you to distribute your load based on this question. And if there is no, only if you're going to test it in the web, then you can just ignore this question. But in case if you have a scope of mobile testing, then please make sure that you get answers for all these questions. That is, what is the ratio of mobile and web application that's going to be part of your testing. And then let's move on to the next question, which is the end-to-end transaction monitoring. So this question has to be asked for your monitoring. So can we monitor end-to-end transactions to identify performance bottlenecks? Or what are all the tools? Like for example, what kind of APM tools are you integrating with your testing? Like whether do you have any APM tools like Dynatrace or App Dynamics that has been part of your testing? Because if you understand, or if you are ready with the tool that is going to be part of your testing, then you're always good. You can integrate it. But if there is no tools for monitoring, then you'll have to plan for any profilers that you can integrate it with the testing, so that you do not miss anything when it comes to the performance bottlenecks. So you have to understand, like, just make sure that you have some tools for monitoring, or otherwise you have to be ready for the profilers. So this question again has to be addressed and has to be noted down. So now we will move on to the last question of this requirement collection document, which is the exit criteria. So we know we have collected all these requirements. So at one point of time, we have to complete everything and we have to come out of the performance testing. So you have to ask, what is the criteria that must be met so that I can complete this testing and address it that is successful. And if it is not, then it's a failure and you'll have to go for another round of testing. So you'll have to determine if the application meets the performance requirements. So the exit criteria is one of the most very critical part that has to be definitely addressed, because you have to understand under what criteria does the testing is successful. Because if you miss this, definitely you're going to not going to end your testing at any point of time. So please make sure you get this exit criteria noted down, like how or what under what circumstances does you agree, or the business or the stakeholders agree that okay, we are good with the testing and we are going to do the sign off. With that, I come to an end, and again thanks everyone for watching this entire video. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. And until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Asan Shanmugam and Little Slaw.